far as the change in assessment and coming up with the appropriate real estate tax rate. But we really do appreciate, I think most of us, if not all of us, have read through your budget, and I appreciated your overview letter. And I understand you want to kind of, let me first say that I don't think that there's any discussion amongst the council that in any way detracts from fully funding your request. Okay? So it's not a justification. In fact, it's kind of one of the few times that I think that we've sat down with the school board where, because of your due diligence in handling your budget, we're not at odds with each other. So, you know, as far as money's always a dividing line.
Yeah.
But we do appreciate that. So take that off your concern list. I think I speak for council in that regard.
Absolutely.
So with that said, you want to go through what you brought?
Sure, thank you. And I'd like to start off first with from the board, thanking the city council and Randy for the work y'all have done. We know the concerns the city, it's us being part of the city, have with what we're doing with the budgets, and that if we didn't look at doing what was necessary with the re-equalization, that, you know, this would be a very difficult conversation to have. The state has moved so far away from funding public education and throwing it back to the local area that, the support that we're getting from the city has been outstanding, and I appreciate that. But with that being said, with the state moving away, as they have, one of the concerning areas is not just that the state funding is being cut, but the percentage of the state funding is being cut. So the pie is getting smaller, but our slice of that pie is getting smaller too. It's clear, and we don't see an end in the near future, that the state's going to continue that direction of cutting public school funding, and rely more heavily on the local as we go forward. I know, as you said, we have the talking points, and be happy to go through that, or just any kind of open discussion that you'd like to have.
I think since some citizens will probably listen into the work session and make sure, why don't you just go through your talking points real quick, or Jennifer, if you want to, however y'all want to do it.
Okay, I'll go over some of the highlights of it. This is the third year that we've had cuts, as y'all know. With this year, it comes to about $3 million in the school budget cuts. We've had $820,000 cut this year in the state funding. That's resulted in 8 positions that have been reduced, 2 of those through layoffs, 6 equivalent positions through attrition. We've eliminated instructional programs, and we've had to increase class sizes and decrease some of the times that classes are being offered, particularly at the high school. Whereas in the past, you may have had a class offered several different times throughout the day, needing to combine those class sizes, and now they may only be offered once during the day, which means it's that much more important for the families to look at their schedule for the 4 years of high school to make sure that all the classes that they want for those electives and things, that they plan those out. That's one of the areas. We've cut approximately $157,000 in categorical cuts. $30,000 of that was in our book purchasing. $70,000 we've reduced in utilities. A big help with that, of course, was the new chiller at the middle school. We're already seeing reduced costs there, and so that was a good help to offset that. But also, we know that in the warm months, it's going to be a little warmer in the schools, and in the winter, it's going to be a little bit cooler. But I believe it was $662,000 of the cuts, of the $1 million cut this year, is coming out of personnel issues. Over the last 3 years, we've cut so far, so deeply in the categorical areas first, and trying to do as little damage as we can to the teaching positions. But that's essentially that's all that's left at this point. So, as the state continues to do their cuts, that's where we're going to have to be looking in the future to be able to make our budget.
But how about your end of year tax, or your, not end of year budget dollars? Do y'all have any kind of projection on where you're going to be at the end of the fiscal year?
At this point, we don't. We did receive a mid-year cut again from the state of about $100,000 is what we're looking at. So we're actually having to use stimulus funds to fill that budget gap. So we really won't have a handle. I suspect we're not going to have much because we've been cut so badly with the cuts that we've made. And when we're getting mid-year cuts like this that we're having to backfill. I do want to mention that we had $1 million budget gap. We cut $820,000, but we also then had to use one-time jobs bill money of about $187,000, partial stimulus money, and the rest jobs bill money to get through this year. The board has wisely decided to hold a little over $400,000 in hopes of helping us get through next fiscal year if we get a mid-year cut from the state again, and then also to help offset the cuts we're anticipating getting from fiscal year 13. So I do want the community to be aware of the fact that they know that money's there, that is what the plan is for that money. But people have to realize that's one-time funding.
And as you said, you were able to use that mid-year this year when the state cut back. And it's one thing, I know we've talked about it before, but again, we appreciate, I know we talked about this maybe 6 months, 8 months ago, your foresight in keeping that money set aside, and we appreciate that as well.
Was the reduction in the number of classes being offered, was that because of the attrition of the 5.5 teachers?
Yes, by reducing the teaching staff, then we'll lessen the number of sections that we offer, in addition to cutting the 2 instructional programs, family and consumer sciences at the middle school, and then the SAT preparation classes that occur at the high school. Those 2 programs have been eliminated. But we will see adjustments, and the availability of courses offered at the secondary level and some effect on classes, the elementary and primary. Once the budget is passed completely through you all, then we can sit and begin the final scheduling. We know exactly how many FTEs we have.
So what a student would now have to do is go to Hampton or Newport News for SAT preparation, or York County probably.
Well, we do have, there's an online program available that we'll be able to maintain online, so our students can go online and do practice testing online. I know there are tutors in the area that do charge, but we won't actually have it being taught as part of the school day during the day anymore, because we had to make programmatic cuts and looked at what we thought we could cut and still do the best we can to maintain the instructional program. So those are the 2 that we cut.
When did y'all start doing that? I didn't know SAT prep was part of the regular school.
I can't answer that. It's been going on as long as I've been here, so about 3 years now.
Oh, okay.
I can't speak to
Well, it must
And
not
was
be
in
much
place when
more
I
than
came,
4
so,
years,
yeah,
so,
right.
okay. Because we used to didn't do that. Teachers contracted and did it in their spare time.
Were the 2 paraeducators, were they involved with special needs?
No, they were tied to the federal grant that helped to fund the elementary Spanish program.
Okay.
And because that funding has now dried up, those 2 positions have been cut, and we are reducing Spanish instruction at the elementary
saw
school
that,
by
yeah.
about 60% now. So that'll be a change for our elementary students.
I noticed you had 2 of the federal programs that were increasing, Impact Aid and Carl Perkins. Given the uncertainty of the federal budget, do you feel fairly certain that those are going to be there? I know Impact Aid has always been on the chopping block.
Yeah, that's a great question, because with the recent budget cuts just done by the federal government, we found out within the last couple of weeks that we're anticipating Impact Aid to be cut, as well as all the title grants and Carl Perkins, which might add Carl Perkins right now is a measly $17,000, but that'll be cut back even more. So as you know, the federal fiscal year is different from the state and the local fiscal year, but we don't have the dollar figures yet, but we will without a doubt be receiving less federal dollars. We think that we will be able to handle that as we move into next year's budget, but it's going to be a problem as we go forward in the fiscal year 13.
Was Impact Aid for special needs students?
No,
Is that the one?
Impact Aid is, well, it's certainly.
Well, I mean, one was like $350,000. I mean, somewhere around there, I think. One of the things from the federal government was like $350.
I'm not
in
sure
revenue?
which one you're referring to. The Impact Aid is the funding that we get for parents who are affiliated with the military.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
So
That wasn't very much,
that's
though.
where that is.
Title VI, I think I'm thinking
Yeah,
of.
Title VI is that's the special education funding, 6B. And as I believe Ms. Owens mentioned in her presentation, while we certainly get that funding, it's never fully funded all the mandates that we have. And I would like to add, I know this is no shock to you, that with the federal budget cuts that we'll be receiving, none of the mandates are disappearing. As a matter of fact, we fully anticipate additional ones in the coming year.
Okay.
Mr. Krieger, you brought up special ed a couple of times. We did see at our school board meeting the other night where they were looking at cutting some funding at the federal level for special education. We don't have any details about that yet, but that was brought up the other night at the school board meeting. We're not sure how it's going to impact us yet.
I noticed you had a reduction in New Horizon. Is that going to affect the number of youngsters going to the governor's school or vocational technical?
At this point, we're holding our numbers at about the same at both the governor's school and the CTE program, so that we hope we can continue to have the same numbers of students. And we work with the executive director there to try and keeping those costs level. He's been making his own cuts behind the scenes as well. What's harder to control for us is the special education costs related to New Horizons, because we just have to provide those services for kids, and those, we get one student who goes there, that can be an additional $30,000 for us.
Well, as Gary pointed out, even though we get less money from the federal government for special ed, you still have to provide the same services that they require. So I mean, we're in a bond, could be in a worse bind. Yeah.
It doesn't look like it's going to get a whole lot better.
No.
The state and the Fed continue to cut and with the state cuts, we know they're not going to change that. They're pushing it all on the cities. It's going to be up to us to come up with financing. And the $405,000 we're holding is the same thing we did last year. We held the money and it paid off.
That money, the $405,000, is only for job retention, correct? For
Exactly.
salaries or whatever?
Jobs built.
It's got to be spent by fiscal year 13.
Yes, we have through September of fiscal year 13, which is why it could be used to help us get through fiscal year 13, because we could front end it to maintain jobs, salaries
Staff,
up
okay.
front. Absolutely, and that's really what it's used for. And if we had not had it, it would have been another $187,000 in cuts, and the only place else we could have gone this year would have been into personnel.
Have you looked at establishing a policy on whether or not pursuing private funding from some large corporations is something you want to do? I know Mr. Freeman and I went to a meeting with some of the people at the state a few months ago, and that was basically what they suggested we encourage you to do.
That was a state solution to your budget problem. Go out and raise it yourself.
Yeah. So I didn't know if we have a policy.
That's a little different.
You could
That's
also
nearly a
stand on street
direct quote
corners,
from the
collect,
state
sell
Secretary of
pencils.
Education.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good handoff. I think if it worked well, they'd be doing it.
Yep.
We just, as you've seen, you see things like the Gates Foundation that dumps a lot of money in, or I believe Zuckerman from Facebook put a lot of money into Newark schools. That certainly, if somebody were willing to do that, we'd be happy to take it. But I don't think we're a candidate.
You're not a candidate.
Yeah, so,
Well, and to that point right there, in essence, we're being more or less punished for being
Yes.
successful.
Right.
Oh, I've been saying that for years. It's the only thing I know where we punish the set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Been so frugal, there's little to cut now. Since you've done with so little for so long, there's nothing left.
Let me ask one other expenditure item. I noticed textbooks. Once you get behind in that, it's so hard to ever catch up. Where do we stand with the cycle of textbooks?
we're trying to keep up as best as we can. I'll tell you that, part of what we're looking at is more and more online use of books too, which will help us because those can stay more up to date. So we're looking at that. We did, as you can see, cut $30,000 out this year. As again, as Owens pointed out in her presentation, we've seen a big drop in that from the state. I'm not going to tell you that we can keep up with it like we used to, but I'll tell you that we're trying to do the best we can to make the right decisions for the kids.
Sure.
I talked to Senator Miller, I guess it was a year and a half or 2 years ago, and talked about what it costs us every time the state does a textbook adoption. And sometimes there's just not real sound reasons for going to a textbook, and when you're looking at roughly, I think it was like 700,000 on, I forget what the subject was, that, you know, that's a lot of money just because they elect to decide we need to go to a different edition. So he postponed that for a year, but then they overcame him the second year, and we back into adopting textbooks again.
Along the same question, I guess, as Ray had, technology. How old are the computers that you're all using? And, I mean, I didn't look in the budget that, to see whether there was, anything in there for, new computers or whatever, or new software. It's got to be outdated, I would think.
Yeah, we've been trying to keep up as best as possible. We do receive still some state funding for technology. It was not all cut out. We do need to use it. As was also mentioned in the earlier presentation, we're required to go to online testing at the elementary school. So we just have to buy computers to do that. We do, I think I mentioned at another meeting earlier with you all, and I know we've talked about it at board meetings, the remainder of the stimulus money that we held on to get through this year, we do have some left that we're using for several capital projects to include the New Horizon CIP. We are going to use some of that to purchase technology to help us through this infusion that we need to do at the elementary school to do online learning. So it's kind of the answer to textbooks. With what we have, we continue to try to do the best we can, but we are using some of that one-time dollars that we have to use by September so that we can make sure we push through the mandate that we have for online testing at the elementary school. So we'll see some new computers, and we replace as we can with the state dollars that we do receive in the area of technology.
But also, one of the things they're doing along the lines of the textbooks is when you and I were in school, I guess everybody got their own book and you carried home 6 or 8 books every day. But now they're going to a lot of the, they'll buy a classroom set. The books will stay in the room and the students will come through and they'll use those in class and then put them back on the shelf at the end of class. So that helps offset some of the cost of having to purchase a textbook for every student.
And
You
with
were a
that-
smart student. You brought your books home to study. Some of us never bothered to get.
What does a student do if they do need to take a book home to study? If
They
they're
get
having a hard time and they're struggling?
They have books, for example, my son has a math book at home, and I requested that, and they're very, very good. The teachers are very good at supporting you for that, because we typically will have a surplus of those sets. And if a parent requests that a textbook come home with the student, they can check it out, take it home, and return it at the end of the year. So they have a book at school to use and a book at home as well.
And that generally cut out the transporting the books back and forth. They still have the books available at home and at school, they just don't have to carry them.
Exactly.
And some of those backpacks weigh a lot.
They really do.
I believe our library still stocks a lot of the books,
Yes.
in case the kids forget them. Don't bring them home on the bus, they're always available there.
And I'll also add that our community has been really good at, especially Poquoson Education Foundation, helping out with grants for technology. I just can't say enough about what they're doing, bringing in small areas of technology into the school, and we've seen several of the board meetings where the students have put together presentations using those what they've gotten from the grants from the PEF, and that's just been a tremendous infusion of technology also. It's not, as you said, with the books getting older, if you stand still in technology, you're going backwards. So it's not nearly where I would like to see it. Being in technology, I'd love to see us taking leaps and bounds forward, but with where we are budget-wise, I think the staff is doing a great job of keeping us as current as we are.
I have another question, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
About, we've mentioned mandates already, and Vice Mayor Freeman mentioned that, Senator Miller had tried unsuccessfully to pull back the
We stopped it
textbook
for
one.
1 year, but the next year it went right ahead again.
Would you all be able to possibly put together a list of some unfunded mandates or some mandates that are partially funded that are really taking a bite? I know you can't do it now, but taking a bite out of our particular budget that we could possibly have a look at and try to send further up the chain and lobby to say, you know, we need some help. They can't keep cutting and holding the mandates. So we need some
Absolutely.
hold harmless
Yes.
on that.
We can definitely provide a list to you.
I'd like to see that.
Other questions of the board?
I'll say that I certainly do appreciate what I'll call a new relationship with the school board, where we're somewhat friendly and speak to each other. And that's nearly back like in the old days when I was on the school board, but we went through a cycle where it was somewhat vicious. And we really appreciate y'all. You're really doing, in my opinion, working with us out in an outstanding manner.
One of the other things we've discussed in the past is facility usage, and we'll be getting into those discussions next year too,
What was that, Bill?
continuing that,
Facility usage.
yeah.
I just think that, you know, after 3 years of budget cuts, that you're doing a tremendous job of keeping the schools, you know, binded together and whatever, and not losing a lot of instructional, staff and support to the students. I mean, I think it's great. I mean, you do a wonderful job, all of you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah.
I would like to pass some of that along to Dr. Parrish and her staff.
Absolutely.
Their fiscal responsibility is unsurpassed. I mean, we still have money that we can carry over. Hampton spent theirs and
Why not? Yeah.
Yeah, so, and they found themselves behind. And Dr. Parrish and her staff have just done a wonderful job giving us something to work with, and I appreciate that. It makes a tough job a little bit easier. So, and of course, y'all's support has been phenomenal as well, and I appreciate that.
Let me tell you that whatever we can do for the schools are the reason that Poquoson is here. You know, that's the bottom line, and we're going to support y'all. And we appreciate, as everybody has said here, what you've done as far as your budget and your fiscal responsibility and your foresight in looking ahead at your challenges. It's not going to get any easier for any of us. So let's kind of cut through the good talk. We're taking it in the chin, big time, from the state of Virginia as they pass down their budget woes to the localities. We'll tell you that the citizens should be very proud of you as a board for living with that and putting up with it and still keeping a grade A school system. We appreciate that, but it's not going to get better. We've got, I know council's going to meet some this summer on some budget woes. I would encourage y'all to do what we're going to do, and I'm sure you have been, because you wouldn't be in the position that you are right now. But to look at what your challenges are early for next year, because we have to address some of the debt service on, I guess it's on schools, in our next budget. So we need to know what those big bogeys are, and the earlier, the better, for what the state or the federal government may be sending down. Collapses in aid, we're just going to come up to fund those needs, but we're going to support these schools. And I feel certain that the citizens of Poquoson want us to support these schools. Okay. So that being said, I won't waste everybody's time sitting here looking at each other. I think we can all go. Okay. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're 40 minutes. We're just going to close the work session, right?